everybody. I'm Anna Hagan. This is Next in Sales, a next level podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you guys to our guest today. This is Loren Brockhouse, and he is the CRO of BigHand Technologies. Loren, thanks so much for being here today.
Yes, Anna. Very excited to spend some time with you.
Awesome. Well, what I would love to start out with is to just have you give a little bit of background on yourself, have the viewers get to know you a little bit better, and then we'll get the conversation rolling.
Sure. I went to college to be an accountant, and I had a mentor who made me aware of an internship at ADP that was paid $7 an hour, and I thought I definitely need money. So I went to the internship, and it was taking 3x5 D&B cards, or think recipe cards when they weren't online, and calling via a real telephone, a landline, and setting appointments. And after setting a few appointments, I was rewarded with going on sales calls, and we went and met with small company finance officers. They were called controllers at the time, and they were middle-aged males that were drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes and looking like they'd never been to a gym. No offense against any of our current finance executives today, but I decided that maybe being an accountant wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And I turned that internship into a very long, successful sales career.
Absolutely. Well, and so one of the questions that I really love to ask is, what is probably the biggest lesson that you've learned that you wish you had known at the beginning of your sales career, and when and how did you learn that?
Yeah, this feels like this would be an encyclopedia volume of books. But I think if I had to narrow it down, I'd say really I can only narrow it to two. I can't get to one, but would be targeting and qualification. And when I think about targeting is who are the best prospects to go after. And when I think about qualification is how can you quickly determine if this is somebody who's going to buy and buy now. So from a targeting standpoint, my first sales job was I was dropped in Iowa. There are 99 counties in Iowa. At the time, ADP only had 5 clients. And I was new to sales. My manager was in Minneapolis, so I had to really try and figure things out on my own. I went to those 5 clients and decided that they have these things in common. They were manufacturers of plastic intrusion products. And I said, I wonder if there are any other manufacturers in Iowa that look like them.
Right.
So I spent $200 on an orange book that listed all the manufacturers in Iowa, found them, and started contacting them. So I stumbled across the targeting aspect pretty early in my career. However, it's proven to be one of the main drivers to success. From a qualification standpoint, unfortunately, I learned this a little bit later. I enjoy working, so I don't always spend enough time planning, preparing, and looking for an easier path. From a qualification standpoint, when we had the financial collapse in 2008, many decisions were delayed, diligence was greater, budgets were cut, and in order to win business, we had to figure out who was going to buy and who was just really shopping.
Right.
So we discovered a process where if there wasn't a trigger event, typically a decision was not going to be made. So trigger events selling payroll and HR software were a new CFO or a new VP of HR, or more likely a new ERP system where they didn't want to implement the in-house solution. So those became the trigger events. And if there was not a trigger event and an opportunity, we typically didn't resource it because data told us that they weren't going to actually buy. So 2 biggest lessons I wish I'd known from day one would be targeting and qualification.
That's a huge part of sales. And it's interesting because I think that there's a lot of crossover between those two portions in sales and how you have to look at it from a hiring perspective as well, targeting the right people and qualifying the right people. And so, obviously you've helped build out a ton of sales teams. What do you think are the biggest pain points that hiring managers are typically facing when it comes to quality hiring for their sales organizations?
Yeah, I think about three P's, which would be priority, process, and passion. I don't believe it's a priority for sales leaders. They're so focused on deals that they don't realize that having a full team of the right people is the most important thing. So it's never a priority until they have an opening. And typically, when you don't prepare and you're rushed into something, you don't do a good job. Secondly, they don't have a process. So if you think about going on a journey, if you don't know the end destination, it's really hard to get there. So if you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to hire the first person that comes along that
Seems like they could do the job.
feels good, looks like what you already have, looks like you, sounds like you, somehow engages you to do all the talking in the interview. That seems to be the best candidate because they're
Yeah.
smart at interviewing. And so I think you need to establish these are the critical skills that are needed. This is what culture fit looks like. These are the questions we're going to ask every candidate. We're going to score them. We're going to use a cross-functional panel that will be working with this salesperson and then really hire via that process. And then I think the last one is passion. If you're not passionate about staffing your team with passionate people, I think you're going to end up with a team that you're frustrated with the outcome. And if you're passionate about hiring, you're going to make it a priority, and you're going to create a process that works. I mentioned to you earlier today that we're on a no at BigHand. We don't have meetings on Wednesday, so we can actually get some work done. However, I do have a couple external interviews. I don't have openings, but I'm creating that top of the funnel pipeline. So when
Very smart.
when an opportunity presents itself, I've got candidates I can go to that I've already qualified from a culture and an interest standpoint.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think that those are all things that I hear from hiring managers all the time, and especially in the sales world. And, I think that can also sometimes be a benefit for working with an agency. If you don't feel like you have an idea of what your process is, especially if you're starting out, a lot of times bringing in an agency or your internal recruiting team, obviously, to help you kind of figure out how do we really qualify what we want for this team. And in your experience, when does it make sense to maybe work with an agency?
Yeah, where I've found an agency most helpful is if your network does not have what you're looking for. So, for example, I'm in legal tech now for the first time in my career. I don't have a network of established legal tech sellers. So, if I want to hire experience, which sometimes is overrated, if I want to hire someone with legal tech sales experience and I need somebody now, then it would be much better for me to go to an agency who can go to specific companies and target the people that I want. If I'm going to a geography where I don't have a presence or I don't understand the nuances, a new country, a new market, I think that would be another time where you would be best served to hire an agency. It goes back to that targeting. If I
Yeah.
don't know the targeting, then I should work with somebody who does, who can help me with the targeting and the qualifications so I get hireable candidates that I select the best from versus a wide group of suspects.
Well, and so, I know you mentioned you're doing some interviews today. What is maybe like your favorite question to ask salespeople in interviews? And what does the answer to that question tell you?
And my favorite question about midway through the interview is, hey, tell me what you do when you're not working. What I
Yeah.
want to check for is, does their level of energy go up, remain the same, or go down?
Right.
If it goes up, then I know they're passionate. If it remains the same or goes down, then I wonder how much passion this person really has for what they do.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. Well, kind of moving back into your own experiences in selling, what has maybe historically been your favorite Hail Mary technique for when you feel you might lose a deal?
Yeah, I don't believe in Hail Marys.
Fair enough.
I don't think they work. I think that buyers can sense desperation, and as soon as they sense desperation, it undermines your credibility. They stop believing in your company, you, and your product. So I think the best Hail Mary is to prevent one, and that is by running a better process. And I think about a better sales process. There are many different sales methodologies, and all of them are valuable. I think it's a matter of determining which one is best for your company, your industry, the maturation of your sales team. However, without exception, I believe that identifying the entire buying team
Mm-hmm.
and identifying what the win results are for each of those buyers is critical to being successful and eliminating the need for a Hail Mary. When you think about the B2B buying process, it's become a committee driven process. The committee has to agree because change management's involved. So buying teams have went from 5 to 10 per Gartner. And so
Right.
10 people on the buying team, you have to get to agree that BigHand is the right company, we have the right product, and Loren Brockhouse is someone we can trust to make that come together. So you have to identify all those buyers, and then you have to know, Anna's going to win because of this. Whitney's going to win because of this. Megan's going to win because of this. So I think those are the best way to present the Hail Marys, identify the buying team and what the win results are for each of those individual buyers.
That's awesome. Well, and in terms of sales leadership, obviously, when we originally were having the conversation about you coming on the podcast, you told me that really growing sales teams and helping to mentor is a real big passion of yours. In doing that, what do you think is maybe the biggest mistake that you've seen some people make when they're going into their first sales leadership role ever?
Yeah, I think I go back to a book written by Patrick Lencioni called The Motive.
Mm-hmm.
And you really need to ask yourself, why do you want to go into sales leadership? If
Yeah.
you want to go into sales leadership because you want more recognition, you don't want to prospect, you want a higher salary, you're probably making the wrong decision. If you're going into sales leadership because you don't need to be on stage and you actually get more fulfillment out of watching others be successful and you enjoy coaching more than doing, and you have the courage to give feedback, then I think you're making that change for the right reason. So I believe that the motives behind why someone wants to get in leadership. The mistake is the greater recognition, greater responsibility, etc.
I hear that a ton. I think it's like the analogy between a sales team and a sports team. The star player who really wants to be on the court. Do you really want to take the move to be coach, or do you want to keep playing?
Yeah, and it's amazing if you look at star players, it's very rare for a star player to become a star coach. In fact, the
Mm-hmm.
number of people who are in the Hall of Fame as a player and a coach is probably less than a handful.
Right. It's just it's a very different personality. It's not even, one is very team focused and one is very like nail to the board on exactly what they need to be doing in order to increase their productivity for the team.
Yeah, I think it's a we thing. If I think of me first, then I shouldn't be a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're starting out your sales career, I've talked to a ton of people in sales. A lot of them have just said that the biggest struggle is obviously pushing through a lot of that rejection that you see. And, what is your advice to those who might be struggling to push through that?
The early advice I was giving Anna was don't take it personally. And I think that is absolutely the wrong advice. I think you should take it personally, and you should use that tension to test and learn. And then you should, rather than think about, I failed and I lost that deal, I should think about, hey, this is what I learned. Here's how I'm going to eliminate that in the future, and I'm going to be successful. So I really think that you have to take a test and learn mentality. and
Yeah.
you fail forward. And if you can take that mindset, then you're taking the positive outlook from that experience rather than the negative outlook. And you're looking at it as a journey rather than an event.
Right, right. I love that term fail forward because, I mean, as a recruiter, I remember when I started making cold calls for the first time. And I remember it was so funny because my COO came to me and was like, nobody's going to tell you to F off on your first day. It's going to be fine. And lo and behold, the third guy I talked to, of course, told me to fuck off. And I let it get to me a little bit. And, I had to have a sit down conversation with my C levels about just, you got to let it drive you. And you got to
Yeah.
just understand that that's another person on the phone and you have no idea what's going on in their life. And on some level, don't take it personally, but also just let it push you forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't know what bad news they just received, what you interrupted.
Right.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Who do you look up to in the world of sales, Loren?
Who do I look up to in the world of sales? For a long time, I looked up to Stephen Covey. He's
Okay.
probably not someone that anyone would say reflects the sales world or relates to the sales world. However, remember, I was dumped in Iowa and my manager was in Minneapolis and I had to sell. I had a mortgage, I had a young baby, and I learned how to sell by listening to 7 Habits of Highly Effective People on cassette tapes. It was that long ago.
Wow.
So initially, I looked up to him and I practiced those, and those principles, those 7 habits, generated a lot of success. And then it transitioned to a couple mentors that I've had that really created tension in my life and allowed me to develop that I wouldn't have on my own because they pointed out where I was coming up short, or they painted a picture that they expected more from me, or I had more potential. So they created just enough tension where I wanted to get better. Now, what I look up to is people who can create success at home and
Yeah.
success at work. So
Awesome.
they can deliver the numbers on a regular basis and they can be a good mother, father, partner, um, daughter, son. I think those are the people that I admire the most and look up to and try to learn from and
Hmm.
then replicate that in my life.
Well, and then, obviously talking a little bit about hiring earlier, Loren, who's the best sales hire that you've ever made?
I'm not going to name names because I don't want to
Fair.
have 20 people reach out to me and ask why they weren't. I'm going to say that there was a person that I hired in Chicago. And the story is like this. We had a star salesperson that went from intern to star seller very quickly. He's a CRO of a company that sells technology to healthcare companies today. And he lost a deal. And we were all extremely surprised because he never lost.
Hmm.
A week later, he lost another deal. And we're like, okay, what's going on? And his manager still is a very wise sage. Somehow went back to both of those companies and asked if he could see the sales orders of the other company. And lo and behold, the same name was on both sales orders. So I then spent the next year recruiting that person. It took me an entire year to convince them to join us. He finally did, was successful in sales, moved into sales leadership, was successful, and then decided to, spread his wings and left. And then I had an opportunity to hire him a second time. And when I left that second experience, he replaced me as a CRO. So I
That's
would
awesome.
say that it took me a year and he had a lot of success. So that's why when I think about who was the best hire I ever made, that's what comes to mind.
If you can't beat them, join them or ask them to join your team.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
And I
Well,
was, arrogant
yeah.
enough to think, well, we've got better company, better product. You got inferior company, inferior product, and you're outselling us. So you're doing something that we could be much better if we could replicate. So come and join us and teach us what you're doing. And he
Yeah.
just out hustled us.
Well, and Loren, I didn't ask this question in the ones that I sent over, but I'm curious, what change would you like to see in the world of sales in the next 5 years?
I would like salespeople to realize that taking a data-driven approach is a much better way to be successful, and do that with the lens of the buyer in mind.
Yeah.
And what I think about then is we need to start shifting some of our go-to-market budget from sales to marketing, because as buyers, we shop online, we evaluate online, we don't engage a seller until we have to.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that word have to specifically. So for salespeople to be successful and create less friction in the buying process, they need to be engaged later in the process, or better yet, sellers become expert marketers.
Yeah.
And start engaging the buyer the way they want to be engaged, and providing the right assets at the right time in the right sequence, and you're going to be wildly more successful. So as a seller, my recommendation or my advice would be go out and start studying marketing.
Yeah.
And become a professional marketer, because I believe that marketing's influence on a dollar of revenue sold is growing each year, and it's probably close to, if not have already passed, the influence that sales makes on a sold deal.
It's so interesting that you say that. I was talking to another sales leader earlier last week, and he was talking about how one of the companies that he had been at, he felt that the marketing and sales teams weren't really working together, and it caused some issues. And so the idea that sales and marketing need to really dig their heels in and work together to create a better process or pipeline, is something that I'm hearing a lot in the market.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true. It's do they trust each other? Who gets credit? You really shouldn't. If you have got a good marketing team, you shouldn't sell anything that wasn't marketing influenced.
Right.
And at the end of the day, sales doesn't create opportunities. That's not how buyers buy. They do research. However, what sales does better than anyone is create relationships. So sales should be spending their time developing wider and deeper relationships with key stakeholders inside their target accounts, the consultants who consult those target accounts, and then embracing marketing's ability to create or show intent and use that intent to move those opportunities forward. It's not a marketing or sales, it's a marketing and sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Loren, I really appreciate you coming on today. Any last advice for our viewers?
I would say stay curious. If you believe you know everything, your W-2 is going to plateau and probably start to diminish, because the world's going to pass you by. So stay curious. Get a little bit better every day. Consume podcasts like this, read books, listen to Audible when you're working out versus ESPN, and stay curious. If you stay curious, you will get a little bit better each day.
Absolutely. Gotta love a growth mindset. Well,
Yes.
Again, thanks so much for being on here today. And everybody, again, this is Next in Sales. If you really liked what Loren or I had to say, like, subscribe, share this podcast, and I hope to see you next week.